Continue with reactions following Advocate George Bezos' passing, and I'm now joined by one of his former students, Elizabeth Sidiropoulos, and she is the Chief Executive at the South African Institute of International Affairs. Very good to have you with us this afternoon, Elizabeth, although under not too joyful circumstances, but we do remember a life that's seemingly so well lived. Tell us about your experience with the late Advocate.
So my experience of the late George Bezos goes to pretty much when the school was opened in 1974, when my parents entrusted me to the care of this very, very new school, untested, which was Greek, but yet very much entrenched in a South African educational system. And I think that was what George Bezos and the people who worked with him in establishing the school intended. This was not supposed to be a school that was a ghetto, a Greek ghetto, but really a school that was embracing, that was based and founded on Hellenic values, which are universal in terms of democracy, respect for human rights, for humanity, freedom of speech, integrity, and all of those kinds of values which we all recognize as being for everybody, and which he also dedicated his life to in the context of his human rights activities. And so that was the school I sort of began my career in. And as a little girl, you know, he was always larger than life, and you'd hear stories from your parents about what he was doing and his legal activities. And I think much later then, as I and my colleague and my fellow students moved into high school, you also began to engage with him and exchange with him, and got to know the man and hear his stories. I've heard many of his stories many times, and I never got tired, actually, of hearing the stories that he told. He told them passionately, both about his recollections from coming out from Greece as a refugee, as well as stories of Walter Sisulu and Nelson Mandela and other people, other great South Africans. And there was always, whenever he recounted stories, he'd get very emotional. He'd also get very emotional when telling stories about his former pupils of Seheti. So a very, very emotional, passionate man. But also driven in the way in which the school's motto drives also its students, that about know thyself being at the core and at the center of what it takes to be a good citizen, both a good citizen in your country, but also globally. And I think those are some of the lessons that we reflect on as we celebrate really a life, and I would say a great South African and a great Hellene. And he was amazing in being able to bridge those two countries and those two societies.
I must say, Elizabeth, increasingly what comes across is a sense of a man to whom mentorship was key. And I wonder if throughout the years that you got to know him through the school, and when he came to speak to the students, whether you're in primary school or high school, do you remember any of the things that he was quite disappointed about, or things that he would maybe warn you as young people about, or say, be aware of this and focus on that? Any of those that maybe come to mind?
Suppose because I stayed connected with him, even after school, I was involved with him on a committee at Wits University, where he was instrumental in establishing a chair of modern Greek studies at Wits. Sadly, that chair is no longer there. And then I was also involved with the Seheti board. The various memories sort of merge into each other. I think he was the lessons he used to go back into Greek history and into Greek ancient drama, which he loved, to give examples of the way in which people should lead their lives. One of the stories that I think is also in his autobiography, in which I think Nelson Mandela speaks about, is the Greek tragedy Antigone, which we actually produced at Seheti when I was there, which tells the story of the sister of two brothers who have both been killed in battle, and whom the king wishes to honor the one but not allow the other to be buried. And Antigone drives and stands up against what she believes is an unfair and cruel decision that lacks dignity for her other brother. And this is a story that was also performed on Robben Island. And this was one of the plays that he would tell us about and communicate the key messages and values that 2,500 years ago were being discussed and performed in ancient Athens. But a lot of these stories blend because, they weave in and out of my engagements with George Bezos over many years. I won't mention how many. These are the things that I now reflect on as I sort of consider his life.
Well, Elizabeth, we just thank you so much for joining us today and just sharing those personal memories and giving such an account of Advocate George Bezos, also really as a teacher in many ways, imparting wisdom and knowledge to the generations that would follow him.